Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Audio Fanfics and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is, what if Naruto had to deal with Mei, Hinata, Sakura, Ino, and all the Kunoichi of the Leaf. Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. The early afternoon sun shone brightly upon Naruto and Mei as they were walking together taking a scenic view of the forest outside of Konoha. Naruto decided that he wanted to show Mei a pond that was just outside the city that he swam in on occasion. The two had talked about many things over their breakfast, topics ranging from how difficult it was for Naruto growing up as a Jinchuriki to the troubles in Mei's village rebuilding from the nightmarish reign of the fourth Mizukage. Mei found that every minute she spent talking to Naruto, or even just being around the warmth he exuded made her want him more and more. She was amazed that someone with so many burdens both past and present could still turn out as such a sweet and tender man. She also couldn't help but laugh at his often goofy nature, but it wasn't a mean or spiteful laugh, it was a grateful laugh. Grateful that in such troubled times a man who was forced to fight and be the pillar of strength for his village could still be so cute and innocent. Naruto was walking along with a gigantic grin plastered on his face. He liked the sensation of Mei cuddled up on his arm, and while he was still nervous about this being a date, the heated make-out session in the alley had really picked up his confidence. He still wasn't sure why Mei was so into him, but he was certainly glad that she was. He turned his head to look at her as he heard her say, "The countryside really is very beautiful here, back home it's much less colorful." Naruto shrugged his shoulders. To him trees were trees, but he was glad that she was enjoying herself. He said, "Yay, it's like this all year round, this area is really awesome. I can't wait to show you the pond that we're headed to." Mei smiled at him as she asked, "Are we going to go swimming?" Naruto answered, "I guess we can if you want, I didn't bring my trunks, but I can always swim in my boxers." "Did you bring anything?" She smiled and answered, "Oh, don't worry, if we want to swim I can make something work." Naruto gulped as he saw the sultry look she had in her eyes as she said that. He looked down at the large amount of cleavage she was showing and his mind started to picture her dripping wet in a very skimpy bikini. She caught his eyes looking at her, filled with a timid lust, and she was filled with the overwhelming desire to kiss him, so she leaned in and captured his lips. Naruto was surprised at first but then started to happily return the kiss. She put one hand on his and the other guided one of his free hands up to her chest. Their lips broke apart and she whispered, "This is so good, Naruto, you taste delicious." She then kissed him hard again. Naruto liked the feeling of her hand on his and liked the softness of her in his hands. Still being inexperienced with woman, Naruto instinctively wrestled tongues with Mei while squeezing the that had been placed in his hand. They kissed heatedly for several minutes until Mei pushed Naruto down onto a bench that was nearby and landed on him, legs spread across his lap. Their lips never broke apart as they found their way to the seat. Naruto was excited and more turned on than he had ever been in his life. Mei's lips were still glued to his, and now he could feel her grinding back and forth on his lap. The heat of her body so close to him felt like electricity tickling his senses across his entire frame. His one hand was still exploring her, but his other free hand got brave and reached out to grab her. He felt the wonderful softness of her flesh through the light fabric of her dress, and took it as a good sign when he heard a moan of pleasure as he applied pressure to her bottom. In response to that, she started to rock into his lap even harder. Mei was quite happy that Naruto seemed to becoming more confident and aggressive towards her. She wanted him to touch every inch of her body, feeling his strong manly hands on her, and had the fires of passion that had long been dormant inside her burning hotter than the hottest lava she could create. She moaned in anticipation as she could feel his rapidly growing erection rub against her through the fabric of his pants. She took one of her free hands and lowered the straps of her dress, letting it fall, exposing her left. She broke away from his kiss and pushed his face down to her exposed and started to nibble on his ear as she begged into his ear, "Kiss me there, Naruto, you feel so good." Naruto looked for the first time in his life at a woman's bare and could see the tiny pink standing at attention. He could also see very small pale hairs on her standing on edge, seemingly percolated by the intense electricity being created between the two of them. He thought it was the most amazing thing he had ever seen and almost instantly put his lips to her and his tongue began to caress it. He couldn't explain what it tasted like, but surely heaven could be no better, and the heat of May's breath on his neck as she panted in pleasure to his touch made him feel like the most powerful man in the world. She sunk her teeth into his neck in a playful bite, and the surprise and pain of her action upped the already absurd levels of excitement coursing through him even higher. She whispered into his ear in a pleading tone, "God, Naruto, more, bite me, grab me as hard as you can, I want you, I need you." She pressed her weight down onto his lap again and took another bite into his neck. Naruto pulled the other strap of her dress down and started to kiss and bite her other. May's hand grabbed one of Naruto's hands and pulled it from where it was planted firmly on her and guided it under the front of her summer dress. She then pulled it all the way inside of her panties and took one of her fingers on top of one of his fingers and slid both into the folds of her very wet and excited vagina. She helped him rub the outside of her as she moaned breathlessly to him, "Do you feel that, Naruto? God, do you feel how wet I am? That's all because of you." She continued to grind up and down on his fingers as she pulled his head back away from her and attacked his lips with her own. Naruto's mind was racing as he hungrily returned her kiss. His fingers were still inside of her, and she was right, they were totally surrounded by moisture. From the little he had learned about women from Jiraiya's pervy books, he knew that wetness down there was a good sign that they were enjoying themselves. Still a little unsure of himself, he decided to explore deeper into the warmth of her with his fingers. The moan he elicited from her sounded like she liked it, so he kept repeating the same rubbing motion. He felt the walls of her womanhood squeeze at his fingers as she groaned louder than before. He felt her hand that had moved away from his fingers reach down into his pants. It found its way inside the loose-fitting ninja pants, and then he felt the heat of her hand reach the inferno that was raging off of his. She pulled back from his lips, a mischievous grin plastered on her face as she looked down on him and said boldly, "And this is what I do to you, Naruto." Finishing that statement, she squeezed his fully erect and tugged up on it a little. Naruto felt the pressure that had been building in his triple as May began to slowly stroke it. He looked up at her, rocking his pelvis in rhythm with her strokes. Her green eyes were ablaze with a look of desire and hunger that could have melted any man. He tried to speak, "May, May please, oh my, it's gonna, I can't." May knew what was about to happen and part of her wanted to stop so that she could feel him fully inside of her, but another part of her was addicted to the looks and grunts of extreme pleasure that were coming from him. She felt incredible, the power she had over him. She could feel his heart racing and his throbbing. She had forgotten how good it felt to have a man that she desired completely under her control. Naruto was lost in a haze as he one more time tried to warn her the best he could, "May, please, stop, Then his brain just glazed over as the release came erupting in his pants and all over May's hand. She smiled as she felt the heat of Naruto's cum spill out of him and run down her hand. She heard him groan and thought he looked incredibly as the calm of a man who had just came washed over him. She stroked him a few more times, milking him of everything as he started to deflate in her hand. She felt him relax back against the bench for a second, a look of pure contentment plastered on his face. She eventually disturbed this once she finally withdrew her hand from his pants, and that snapped him out of his blissful stupor, and he suddenly looked scared as he started to bluster out, "Oh my god, May, I'm so sorry, it's just you're so beautiful and you kept going, I just couldn't stop it." She laughed at his apology and planted a very soft kiss on his lips. After the kiss she said, "No need to apologize, Naruto, I wanted to make you feel as good as you make me feel. I don't know how to explain it, but these past days with you have been the best I've had in a long time." She kissed him again. Naruto smiled his goofy grin at her and said, "They've been pretty good for me too, especially today." His grin got stupidly wide after saying that. "But I am sorry about the mess." May giggled again and indicated to the cum on her hand and answered, "Oh, this is nothing." And to prove her point, she licked some of it off of her hand. Seeing her lick his cum off of her hand amazed Naruto, and he just slumped all the way back on the bench admiring the beauty of the woman in front of him. Naruto just said, "Wow, May, I just can't believe how beautiful and awesome you are, I never want you to leave the village." She laughed as she got up off of him and used her unsoiled hand to fix her dress. Then she stood up and grabbed a few leaves to wipe the remnants of Naruto's excitement off her other hand. They sat there in silence for a few moments as she continued to clean up a little and Naruto tucked himself back away. She then turned and said, "Well, let's head back to that pond you wanted to show me." Just then a large cough interrupted them and they both turned to see Temari standing up the path staring at them. Naruto's face turned bright red in embarrassment as he said, "Oh hey Temari." Temari looked at both of them and then said, "Sorry to disturb you, Naruto, but Shikamaru was supposed to meet me and he didn't, I'm a little worried. Shadow Boy's always punctual, could you please help me look?" She really played up the concern on her face and voice, hopefully convincing Naruto this might be serious. Naruto looked at Temari and thought about what she said. No matter what Shikamaru said, he always went out of his way to be around Temari, so if he missed an appointment with her it could be something bad. The sudden concern that one of his closest friends could be in danger woke Naruto from his post-orgasm bliss and he snapped into attention and stood up saying, "Yay Temari, I know he wouldn't stand you up, this could be bad, let's go." He turned to May and said, "Geez May, I'm really sorry, but I've got to help Temari. Do you know how to get back to the village from here?" May sighed as she said, "Yay sure Naruto, I can get back from here, no problem. One thing though Naruto, if you find Shikamaru please come to my house for dinner tonight." Naruto smiled and said, "Sweet, sure I definitely will, can we have ramen?" May laughed and answered, "Of course I'll have Ichiraku deliver." Naruto grinned stupidly and said, "That's great May, you're the best, thanks." May said in a sweet voice, "Anything for you Naruto." Then May switched to a heavily sarcastic tone as she addressed Temari, "Oh and Temari, if you happen to find Shikamaru and he's not too damaged, I'd love it if you and he would join us too." Temari was wary of the tone of voice the Mizukage addressed her with and even more disturbed by the murderous look in her eyes, but being the sister of the Kazekage meant that she needed to observe the niceties, so in a begrudging voice she answered, "Of course Lady Mizukage, I'd be delighted. Thank you. Now let's go Naruto." Then Naruto waved one last time and followed after Temari. May looked at the two walk off into the horizon and sighed in disappointment. She really enjoyed herself, and her body was tingling in anticipation of her next tryst with Naruto, which she had hoped would be mere minutes from now when they reached the pond he was taking her to, but now who knew when it was going to come. She slowly started to make her way back to the village, laughing in her head. Just how stupid did that pathetic little shadow ninja think she was? Sending your girlfriend in on a phantom search and rescue mission would not be what May would describe as staying out of the way, so she guessed that she would just need to get her point across a little more clearly next time. Shikamaru was making his way towards the Hokage's office when he saw Hinata walking down the street towards the direction of Naruto's apartment. He guessed. He jumped down from the roof he had been scaling and landed next to her. Hinata jumped a little when Shikamaru appeared by her side. She said, "Hello Shikamaru, why are you here?" Shikamaru said, "Hey Hinata, I actually want to talk to you." Hinata got a little nervous but asked, "Oh, what did you want to talk with me about?" Shikamaru answered, "Well, it's about Naruto and the Mizukage." Hinata just replied sheepishly with an, "Oh." Shikamaru continued, "Well Hinata, I have bad news about Naruto. The Mizukage wants to take him away from the village and make him her husband." Hinata answered, "Well Shikamaru, I already knew that. The Hokage told me about it, and she wants me to do something about it." Shikamaru was somewhat happy hearing this news. It meant that the Hokage was trusting in his plan. Unfortunately, his plan was sucking pretty hardcore at the moment. He looked at Hinata with a discerning eye and said, "Look Hinata, we all know that you've had a huge crush on Naruto since the academy days. I know you're worried about Naruto not returning your feelings, but I assure you that Naruto has always liked you a lot. You know he can be totally oblivious, he never knew you liked him, so he could always act naturally around you. Now that you told him that you loved him, you scared him off. He's still inexperienced with women, so he's trying to ignore the situation until he knows what to do. Which knowing him could be never. The last time you confessed he thought you got killed, and then he had to run off and save the village. Since then things have been so cray around here. The next time you see him, be brave and do it again, and don't let him run off until he tells you how he feels. This time though, confess in a more convincing manner than words, just kiss him." Hinata looked down shyly as she answered, "That's what the Hokage told me to do, but I'm still scared about doing it. The last time I was pumped full of adrenaline, I thought we were going to die. Everyone says that he wants me, but no one really knows. It's so easy to watch from a distance, he never breaks my heart when I stay away." Shikamaru answered softly, trying to soothe some of his friend's doubts, "Look Hinata, you're right. I don't know for sure what will happen, but if he leaves the village and you never had any sort of resolution to your feelings, it could trouble you for the rest of your life." Hinata said, "Yay, I know, I've been trying to build up my courage for a while now, but now I can't find him. I'm sure he's with the Mizukage. I can't just burst in wherever they are and kiss Naruto in front of her. I'm gonna have enough trouble working up the courage if we're alone." Shikamaru thought for a little, considering the point Hinata had just made. He let out an exasperated sigh as he rubbed the back of his head, and then he started to speak. "All right Hinata, I've got a bit of a strange idea. It'll get you a chance to be alone with him and also force him to confront his feelings for you right before he sees you. You probably aren't going to like it, but just trust in me, I'm looking out for both of you. I've always wanted to see the two of you get together." Hinata looked curious as she asked, "So what is it Shikamaru, what's your plan?" Shikamaru answered, "Tonight I'll use 2 of my shadow clones under a henge to take you of the village. I'll barge in and tell Naruto that you got kidnapped, and then he'll rush off to save you. I'll accompany him, follow an easy path, stop off to fake fight one of my clones and tell him to go on and save you. Then he'll defeat my clone and save you, and that's your cue to show him how grateful you are." Hinata looked skeptical and said, "I don't know, I don't want to lie to him." Shikamaru said, "Look, it's not really a lie, I'll be kidnapping you, only with good intentions. Please Hinata, just give it a try. Naruto belongs with you, we just need to give him a little shove in the right direction." Hinata was still not thrilled by the idea, but was very touched by how genuinely Shikamaru seemed to want to help her get with Naruto. She was very nervous about this whole situation, but the look Shikamaru was giving her was hard to deny, so she said, Okay Shikamaru, I guess I can try your plan. Shikamaru said, good, I'll come and get you around 8 o'clock tonight. Now if you'll excuse me, I need to go find Tamari. I'll be outside the Hyuga compound 8 sharp. Later Hinata. Hinata watched as Shikamaru jumped up onto a nearby roof and sped off in the opposite direction. She turned around and headed back towards her house. Now that Shikamaru left her, the nervousness that she had been feeling quadrupled. Tonight she was going to have to confess her love to Naruto again. Tonight she'd know once and for all if he actually felt the same way about her. Her mind was racing with thoughts both incredibly hopeful and agonizingly depressing as she walked back home. Tamari and Naruto walked along the path back towards Konoha. She and Naruto weren't particularly close, but she did owe him a lot for the changes he brought about in her brother Gaara. She had always found his strange combination of absolute confidence and unbreakable will with extreme goofiness to be quite entertaining. She thought of him like her strange little long-lost brother. Still, after the encounter between Naruto and Mei that she just witnessed, she felt a little weird with this situation. She turned to look over at Naruto and chuckled a little bit to herself as she noticed that he was walking along happily, seemingly unfazed by the awkwardness in the air. He met her gaze and smiled as he said, so Tamari, any idea where Shikamaru is going to be? She shrugged like she didn't know the answer. She felt a little guilty about lying to Naruto, but Shikamaru did beg her to help him and she couldn't say no to Shadow Boy, especially when he begged. Not to mention the promise of a real date with him had her more excited than she would ever admit to anyone. Naruto continued in a voice full of sincerity and concern, don't worry Tamari, I'm sure he's fine, we'll find him. She smiled at Naruto and said, thanks Naruto, I'm sure we will too. The two walked along for a few more minutes when finally Tamari's curiosity about Naruto and Mei got the best of her, so she asked, hey Naruto, how do you know the Mizukage? Tamari noticed a slight blush flush across his cheeks as he answered, oh well she's visiting Konoha and I'm her guide around the village. Tamari asked in a mildly suggestive tone, so where exactly have you been, guiding her? Naruto answered, oh nowhere really, we went to the Hokage monument, other than that we just went around town. Tamari laughed inside her head at how naive Naruto was as he appeared to be totally oblivious to what she was implying. Naruto kept on speaking, I can't wait to find Shikamaru, having dinner with you two is gonna be fun. I've been waiting for you two to finally start dating. He's gonna be so funny complaining about not wanting to be there. Naruto started to chuckle to himself. Tamari laughed a little in response to Naruto's comment. She had no doubt that he was 100% accurate about how Shikamaru would take the news about his dinner date with Mei. The two of them entered through the gates of Konoha, the guards waving at Naruto and him smiling and waving back. Naruto asked, where do you think we should check first? Tamari shrugged and said, we may as well start at the Nara complex. The two of them turned down the street and headed towards the part of the village that housed Shikamaru's family estates, or what was left of them anyway. Tamari realized that she actually did have no idea where Shikamaru was, and remembered him saying something about heading off to see the Hokage. Still, that was a few hours ago, so she figured that checking out his house was as good a place as any to start. Naruto's voice broke the silence. So Tamari, are you and Shikamaru a couple yet? She turned and stared daggers at the spiky-haired ninja as she answered in a harsh voice, well, not that it's any of your business, but I have no interest in dating that lazy excuse for a shinobi, not now, not ever. Well, she knew that was a lie, seeing as she couldn't wait to get him alone again, but she still did not appreciate being teased about it by Naruto. Naruto wiped his forehead and said, whoosh, that's good for Shikamaru, seeing as I thought you might get mad that I saw him making out with Ino yesterday. That bit of news got the blood-burning supernova hot in her veins and she stopped walking and said in a highly agitated voice, "You saw him doing what yesterday?" The daggers she had previously been staring at Naruto with had been replaced by pure murderous intent. Naruto just laughed in her face, grabbing his gut and said, "Ha ha ha Tamari, sure there's no way you would ever want to date Shikamaru. You should see your face, you look like you want to strangle me." Tamari was getting pretty annoyed by Naruto's attitude, but still wasn't sure whether what he said about Shikamaru and Ino was true. As if he could read her mind, Naruto continued, "Don't worry Tamari, I was joking, I just wanted to see your reaction. We both know he's too afraid of you to do anything with any other girl." Tamari continued her death stare at Naruto as she said, "So what Naruto, it's not like you aren't scared of Sakura." Naruto swallowed hard, fearfully picturing what Sakura would have done to him if she had walked in on what he and Mei were doing not an hour ago. He then said in a meek voice, "You're right Tamari, Sakura is pretty scary, maybe even as scary as you." He finished his voice picking up at the end as he smiled his bright goofy grin at Tamari hopefully. Tamari's evil stare broke at his joking compliment and she started to laugh again agreeing with Naruto, "You're right Naruto, Sakura can be pretty scary." Just then Shikamaru jumped down next to them. Naruto turned and said, "Hey there you are Shikamaru, I can't believe you stood up your girlfriend here, she was so worried about you." Shikamaru shook his head and said, "Whatever, I was busy Naruto, but thanks for taking care of her for me." Tamari turned and gave Shikamaru a disapproving look as she said in a disgusted tone, "I don't need either of you to take care of me." Naruto laughed and pointed at Shikamaru and said, "Haha, looks like you're in trouble now Shikamaru. Well, now that you found your boyfriend Tamari, I'll be taking off now. I'll see you guys tonight, later." Finishing that taunt, Naruto took off into the distance. Once Naruto was out of sight, Shikamaru grabbed Tamari and pulled her in for a kiss. Their tongues danced for about a minute when Shikamaru pulled back and asked, "What did Naruto mean by he'll see us tonight?" Tamari looked up into his eyes and answered, "Oh yeah, I sort of agreed to have dinner with Naruto and the Mizukage tonight, and I said you'd come along." Shikamaru looked more annoyed than usual as he asked, "You said we'd do what?" Tamari laughed at his anticipated reaction, "Oh come on Shadow Boy, it's just a little dinner, it won't be that bad." Quote, Shikamaru said, "Yay, it may just be dinner, but it's with that psycho bitch. How rudely did you interrupt the two of them on their walk?" Tamari said, "Well, not as soon as you probably would have liked, they got a little closer than any of us would have wanted them to." Shikamaru looked disturbed by this news and asked, "What exactly went on?" Tamari answered, "Let's just say that Mei is a very aggressive woman and I saw more of Naruto than I ever wanted to." Shikamaru said, "Oh shit, you mean they?" Tamari shook her head and answered, "No, it didn't get that far, but they both had their hands and mouths all over each other. I stepped in right after Naruto had his climax, so to speak." Shikamaru let out an extra hard exasperated sigh as he said, "Damn it, why is this going so bad? I can think of a million different strategies for a million different situations, but how do you stop a teenage boy from hooking up with an absolutely gorgeous woman who's just throwing herself at him? Shogi never prepped me for a problem like that." Tamari gave him an angry glare and said in an accusatory tone, "Absolutely gorgeous, huh?" Shikamaru just answered in his increasingly agitated tone, "Come on Tamari, I don't need that shit from you, I didn't mean anything by that." He leaned down and gave her a hard passionate kiss. He pulled back and continued, "For some reason I don't understand, the only woman I want is the bossy, moody and apparently jealous one standing in front of me. Still, I hate failing at missions, especially ones direct from the Hokage. More importantly, Naruto is one of my closest friends, and I don't want him getting taken advantage of." He may be one hell of a shinobi, but he's still a knucklehead. There is no way he's ready for a crazy bitch like the Mizukage. He needs a nice sweet innocent girl like Hinata. Temari looked at Shikamaru, still excited by the kiss he just gave her and also turned on by the forceful tone he addressed her in. He was usually so blasé about most things, she really liked it when he got angry or excited about something. She was glad that she was one of the few people who could elicit that reaction. Still, she didn't really agree with his assessment of Naruto's love life. She said, "I'm still not sure that you've cast the right leading lady to foil Mei's pursuit of him. Hinata is a sweetheart and all, and her little crush on him is cute, but putting Hinata up against Mei is kind of like putting a bunny in the ring to fight a tiger. Plus, I'm not as convinced as you that Naruto is into her. Sakura, on the other hand, she's the girl he's always wanted, she's the one he'd do anything for even without her asking. Plus, she's got enough fire in her to not get completely bowled over by Mei." Shikamaru answered, "Well, I do agree Sakura has a better chance of standing up to the Mizukage. I'm hoping Hinata never actually has to deal with her. Plus, the most important thing is I don't think Sakura's fully over Sasuke, and I think that even if she has feelings for Naruto, that she's not ready to deal with them." Temari countered, "That may have been true until now, but that look I saw on her face this morning made me pretty sure that she wasn't happy about someone else kissing Naruto." Shikamaru said, "Well, even if that's the case, there is no way that I'm going to go tell Sakura to make a move on Naruto. I'm already up to my neck in bossy women, I don't need to deal with another one. At this point, if Sakura gets jealous and breaks them up, I'll be happy. Anyway, I'm sick of talking about Naruto, let's move on to a better topic." As he said that, he snaked his arms around Temari's waist and pulled her in tight to him and then lowered his lips onto hers for a soft kiss. She squeezed into him and they stayed like that for several minutes, blissfully oblivious to the outside world. When they finally broke apart, he said, "We've got a few hours to kill till our dinner in hell, I know how I'd like to spend them." He gave her a wink and she laughed at him as she punched him quite hard on the arm. He chuckled at her reaction and said confidently, "You know you want it just as much as I do. Now I have to go really quick and talk to Choji about something important that I need him to do for me. You can head to my house, my mom will let you in and I'll catch up to you in like 20 minutes. She looked at him and asked, "Since when do you give me orders, Shadow Boy?" He kissed her quickly again and said, "I know you like it when I boss you around, almost as much as I like it when you do it to me. Now I'm heading to Choji's, I'll see you in a little." He gave her one last kiss and then broke off into a run towards his friends. Shikamaru entered his house, kicking off his sandals at the entrance. He had just come from his best friend Choji's house, where he had described to his portly companion his plan to fake a kidnapping of Hinata. Since he was going to be at dinner with Naruto and the Mizukage, he needed Choji to come and inform them of Hinata's abduction. He was still very nervous about dinner with the Mizukage. He still felt a dull burning sensation on his balls from his previous run-in with her, and he feared what she would do to him if she figured out the amount of interference he had been running on her courtship of Naruto. He was 99% sure she wouldn't dare kill him in his own village, but he also had no doubt about the multitude of non-lethal damage she could do to him, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally as well. Troublesome woman, he quietly mumbled to himself as he walked past his mother. His mother asked, "What was that, Shikamaru?" He sighed and answered, "Oh, nothing, Mom, I was just mumbling to myself." She said, "Oh, okay. Temari came by and said that you told her to wait for you here while you went to Choji's. You know that is rude, she's a very important diplomat from the Sand Village, you shouldn't blow her off like that just to go do something silly with your buddy. You're a representative of not only the Leaf Village, but also the Nara clan, You need to act like more of an adult sometimes. Shikamaru answered, Man mom, come on, I was only gone like 30 minutes. I just needed to talk to Choji about something important. His mom answered with the same bossy tone, You're just lucky that Tamari likes you so much. Any other diplomat wouldn't take your immature attitude so easily. When are you going to do something about that anyway? That girl would make an excellent wife for you. Not only is she gorgeous, but politically she is the sister of the Cage and that would help cement the alliance between our villages, and add some prestige to the Nara clan, plus having such an important wife could only enhance your chances of becoming Hokage in the future. Shikamaru answered defensively, Mom, I'm still too young to think about getting married, and I don't have any intentions of becoming Hokage. Naruto's going to become Hokage, I'll be happy to be the head Jonin just like Dad. As for Tamari, don't worry Mom, I have no intention of letting her get away, I'm just not ready to get married. His mom smiled and answered, Well, I'm glad to see you are at least thinking about her seriously finally. I still think you'd be a better Hokage than Naruto. I mean, he's very brave and strong and certainly has the will of fire, but I'm worried that he might not have enough upstairs, but I do admire your loyalty to him. She gave Shikamaru a quick peck on his forehead as she finished lecturing him. He asked, Speaking of Tamari, where is she, Mom? She answered, Oh, she said she was going to wait in your room. He said, Okay Mom, I'm going to head up there. I shouldn't keep her waiting any longer. His mom looked at him sternly and said, Now you behave like a gentleman, young man. He sighed as he answered, Of course Mom. Shikamaru then left the kitchen and made his way down the hallway to his room. He opened the door to his room and saw Tamari laying comfortably on his bed. Tamari gave him a sinful smile as he walked in and said, I'm so glad that your mom thinks I'm such a great catch for you. I really would make a perfect wife, and there is definitely no way a pathetic shadow boy like you could do any better. Shikamaru looked shocked that she had overheard his conversation with his mother, so he asked with surprise in his voice, You heard me talking to my mom, but how? Tamari got up from the bed and said in a sultry voice, Oh, I have my ways. She got next to him and pushed him up against his door and whispered in his ear, And there's no way I want you to act like a gentleman, I want you to act like the depraved little boy that you are. She grabbed his full with both of her hands and hungrily captured his lips with hers. Shikamaru was a little stunned by her sudden aggression, but he was certainly not going to fight it. He forcefully returned her kiss and aggressively spun both of them around and pushed her hard up against the door. She moaned in excitement as she propped her against the door and wrapped both of her tan muscular legs around his waist. He grinded against her as their tongues stayed locked in a passionate dance. He felt her rub her hands through his hair, and he responded by pressing harder against her into the door, eliciting another sound of pleasure from her. Their lips broke apart, and his mouth went to her neck where he started to playfully bite all over her. She moaned, Yes Shikamaru, God it's good. She squeezed her legs which were wrapped around him, trying to pull him deeper into her. She could feel his level of excitement throbbing through his pants. Knowing that she did that to him increased the yearning that had been building inside of her all day. Their heated makeout session this morning, followed by witnessing Naruto and Mei's hot little rendezvous, had filled her head with lustful thoughts all day. She had wanted to keep it under control, but being on his bed, being in his room alone surrounded by his manly musk had only driven her even more insane. Her desire was like a giant wave that was being held back by the dam which was her self-control, but the simple action of him walking through the door had been the final push that wave needed to destroy her resolve. She started to talk again, her voice panting, Take me to the bed Shika, I'm on fire, I can't take it anymore, I need you inside of me. I need all of you. She started to kiss his forehead as his mouth was still glued to her neck. Shikamaru could hear the pleading in her voice, and the deep need she felt for him. He was still a virgin and was very nervous about what was going on here, but he knew there was no way that he could deny the fire burning inside of him, and the desire pouring off of her. He carried her away from the door, her legs still locked around him, and started to kiss her again. The two of them hit his bed, and not being fully aware of where he was, it tripped him and the two of them fell still wrapped up together. She let out a yelp of delight as she felt all of his manly weight push her down into the bed. She opened her legs wide, letting him fully between them as her hands reached for his pants. Shikamaru pulled away from her lips and put one of his hands on her cheek as he locked onto her emerald eyes and asked, all seriousness in his voice, "You're sure about this, Tamari?" She laughed and answered, "Just shut up and take me already." He smiled as he felt her hands finally succeed in undoing his pants, and her taunt emboldened him. He reached his hands up her skirt and found her panties. He felt her legs quiver in anticipation as his fingers touched her delicate skin underneath the fabric of her underwear. He could feel the heat and want radiating from her, and he quickly and roughly yanked her panties down her legs. She lifted her into the air to help him remove them. She was still fumbling around his pants and finally got her fingers around his fully erect manhood. As her fingers completely wrapped around him, she felt him shudder in pure ecstasy. He could feel the warmth of her hand embracing him, and it felt incredible. A shiver ran down his spine as he imagined how good being fully inside of her, like he would be any moment now, was going to be. He felt her start to slowly stroke him, which caused him to plead gutturally, "Don't too much, Tem, I might not be able to hold it, it's just too good, you're just too beautiful." She blushed even more red at his words. Even in the throes of passion, nothing was better than hearing the man you were hopelessly in love with call you beautiful. She also knew just how sincere his words were, as she could literally feel his heart race through the throbbing of his in her hand. He finally had fully peeled her panties down her legs, so she used her leg to push him further down onto herself. She begged, "I can't wait anymore, I'm burning up, please, oh God, please make me yours, I want to be yours forever." Shikamaru pushed his weight down onto her as his fully engorged disappeared beneath her skirt, searching desperately for what would become its ultimate conquest. She could feel the heat of his plunging closer, and she grabbed his and forcefully guided him inside of her. She felt intense pressure at the entrance of her vagina as her last second as a virgin was spent in a mixture of pain and bliss as Shikamaru's broke through the barrier of her innocence. A few small tears formed at the side of her eyes as she adjusted to the new sensation of fullness she was feeling as Shikamaru began to slowly work his in and out of her. Shikamaru felt the greatest sensations of his life rocket throughout his entire body as he felt the wetness and warmth of Tamari encompass and embrace him. He looked into her eyes as he slowly rocked inside of her, and he saw the tears, which caused him some concern. He kissed her gently and asked, "Are you okay?" She smiled and nodded as she answered, not with words but by kissing him and pulling him deeper into her with both her hands and pelvis. The feeling of more of him sliding further into her and her hands on his made the pleasure he had been feeling intensify. He started to pick up his pace as he was starting to lose himself in the moment. She began to rock her hips in time with his thrusts as she was starting to become accustomed to the fluidity of. She broke apart from his lips and started to moan breathily, "Oh my God, Shika, don't stop. You feel so good." She squeezed his, trying to help him push into her as deep as he could, the want and need she had been feeling for him for all of the years finally coming to fruition. Shikamaru wanted this to go on forever, but he could feel the pressure of his climax rapidly approaching, and as he felt her teeth voraciously dig into his shoulder as she pleaded for more. The pain excited him more than he could ever imagine. He started to speak, "Tamari, I'm gonna." She wrapped her legs forcefully around his pelvis, desperately needing him to explore every inch of her. She begged, "Don't stop, Shika, it's so good, Please fill me up, I need it. Shikamaru couldn't fight it any longer. He totally gave in to his most primal urges and started to pump in and out of her at a furious pace. She continued to move in motion with him and beg for him. Suddenly his brain, which had already been lost in pleasure, felt an explosion of intense joy as he lost all control and started to spill all of his love inside Tamari. He groaned as he climaxed, "Oh Tamari." Tamari felt the heat of his release spread through her and felt his pace slow down considerably. She couldn't help but feel a little disappointed as the pace he had been pushing for the past 30 seconds had been building her towards an orgasm better than any she had experienced alone in her room. With him slowing and eventually slumping down on her, she knew that it was done and she would go unfulfilled. He kissed her and then rolled off of her. He said, "God Tamari, that was incredible. So much better than I ever imagined." She smiled and snuggled up tight into him. The disappointment from the quick finish had disappeared, and the happiness of finally being with Shikamaru like she had wanted to for so long washed over her. He wrapped his arm around her and kissed her on the forehead as they lay there in contented silence for a few minutes. Suddenly he shot up in a panic as he said, "Oh shit. We didn't use." She laughed and pulled him down and shushed him. "Don't worry, I've been waiting for like 2 years for you to finally make your move, so I started taking the pill." He for once breathed a sigh of relief instead of the usual one of exasperation, as he said, "Damn, you mean we could have been doing this for years? Sometimes I really am an idiot." She laughed and smiled as she watched him stand up and put his pants back completely on. He said, "I think I'll take a shower, and then you can take one after. I'm all sweaty and in my normal gear. If my mom finds out I'm having dinner with the Mizukage and I'm not in formal clothes, she'll kill me." Tamari laughed as Shikamaru opened the door and headed towards the bathroom. She reached for her panties on the floor and put them back on. Then she lay back in the bed, and bunched the covers up over her as she closed her eyes and smiled as she thought about how wonderful she felt from her first day as Shikamaru's girlfriend. Sasuke sat in the trees outside of Konoha looking over the city he spent the formative years of his life in. He smiled at the damage caused by the Akatsuki, and was glad to see they were rebuilding because he relished his chance to destroy the treacherous city that turned his brother against their own clan, and destroyed both Itachi and Sasuke's entire life. "So what's the plan, Sasuke?" asked the voice of his unfortunate travel companion Kabuto. Sasuke, like he had for most of their trip, chose to ignore the question posed by Kabuto and continued to stare off into space. Kabuto laughed as he continued, "It still amazes me that an immature brat like you managed to kill Orochimaru. I guess you can't fight the genetics of the mighty Uchiha clan." Kabuto ended, his voice laced with sarcasm. Sasuke still stared off into the distance, continuing to tune out his companion. Kabuto laughed again as he said, "Seriously Sasuke, are we just going to sit out here? What's the plan to capture the Hyuga girl? Both of us are very strong, but just walking in there and taking her is a bit ambitious even for us." Sasuke spotted in the distance the very girl Kabuto was asking about, leaving the town guarded only by 2 shadow clones of Shikamaru that were under a henge for some reason. Sasuke put his hand up as if to silence Kabuto and finally answered him, "Well Kabuto, I did have a plan, but it appears it will not be necessary as Hinata is currently walking out of the city right towards us." Kabuto looked over to where Sasuke had been staring off and saw her in the distance and licked his lips in a very Orochimaru-like fashion and said, "I just love it when the prey walks right into your trap." Sasuke nodded and motioned his fingers, giving Kabuto an unspoken signal to be ready to pounce. Mei sat on the corner of the bed in her room. She had just changed out of the summer dress she was wearing on her daytime walk with Naruto, and now had on one of her more standard green dresses on. She had a devious smile plastered on her face as she was mulling over all the ways to torture the spiky-haired shinobi who had been doing his best to disrupt her pursuit of Naruto. She knew being in his village she couldn't do anything too devastating, but she still looked forward to watching him squirm all night long. Her thoughts were disturbed by a knock at the door. She quickly said, "Enter." The door creaked open and her advisor Ao slinked into the room. He said, "Sorry to disturb you, Lady Mizukage, but the food you ordered has arrived and also this letter with a seal direct from the Raikage has been delivered, and it is labeled urgent." Mei stood up and walked over towards her advisor and snatched the scroll from his hand. She inspected the seal and decided it looked legitimate enough, so she cracked it open and unfurled the scroll. She quickly perused the contents and could not hide the annoyance on her face as she learned the details. Apparently the Raikage wanted to have another Cage Summit to discuss strategy about the upcoming war against the Akatsuki, and the worst part about it was he was ordering them to meet in 3 days. That would mean that she would have to leave for it sometime tomorrow. She knew that she was making progress with Naruto, but asking him to marry her now would be way too drastic. Leaving him in the village would give her rivals a chance to make their move too. She sighed and thought to herself, "I guess I'll just have to rock his world so hard tonight that he won't even notice those other little girls." Ao asked, "If you don't mind my asking, Lady Mizukage, what does the letter say?" Mei gave him a disdainful look as she said in a commanding voice, "Prepare our things to leave tomorrow. The Raikage has called for all of our presences at a strategy conference." Ao bowed his head and answered, "Of course I will start right away. Your guest should be arriving any moment now too, milady." Then he backed out of the door and left. Mei walked over towards the mirror she hung up and looked at herself one more time in the mirror. She smoothed down her dress and then pulled the fabric away from her, exposing a little more cleavage. Then she fixed her hair, making sure to push down her bang to cover her right eye. Her eyes went up and down her reflection and then she nodded her head in approval as she turned and then exited her room. Mei made her way into the dining room and saw that Ao had already unpacked and set up all the food from the ramen shop. Just as she was looking over the food, her advisor Ao came into the room followed by Naruto. Ao said, "Hello milady, your first guest has arrived." "Thank you, Ao. You can excuse yourself now." Mei replied. The advisor backed out of the room and Mei walked over towards Naruto. Naruto smiled at Mei and said, "Hello Mei, wow, you look awesome." Mei laughed and smiled at the young blonde shinobi as she closed the distance between them and then whispered, "Thanks Naruto." Right before she captured his lips in a heated kiss. Their lips broke apart and Mei continued whispering into Naruto's ears, "I missed you Naruto. I was disappointed that we got interrupted this afternoon." Naruto thought back about the fun they had earlier in the day and couldn't help but agree with Mei that he too was disappointed with getting disturbed on their morning date. The memories of his earlier success with Mei gave him the confidence to be a more aggressive, and so he kissed her again very hard and then started to push her with his body backwards until they bumped into the table, lips still locked in a passionate battle. Mei was quite turned on by the sudden aggressiveness shown by her younger lover and rested her on the table as she widened her hips a little to make the position more comfortable. She also grabbed him by the and drew him in closer towards her. Their heated makeout session lasted for about another minute before she sensed that the other guests had arrived and pushed Naruto off her and said to him, "We've got to stop now, your friends are here." Naruto backed off, once again disappointed by having his time with Mei cut short. He realized that his had become quite hard from kissing her. He panicked a little, realizing that Shikamaru and Tamari were about to come in and did not want them to see him like that, so he quickly slammed his into a seat. Mei laughed at Naruto's reaction to the situation and then quickly straightened out her slightly ruffled dress. After a few seconds, Ao came in followed by Shikamaru and Tamari and he motioned with his arm towards the table. Mei gave a gigantic creepy smile to the both of them and said, "Hello Tamari, it's very nice to see you again." Tamari smiled politely and gave a little nod as she answered, "Thank you for the invitation Lady Mizukage, I'm pleased to be here." Tamari then took a seat opposite Naruto, who had already grabbed a large bowl of miso ramen and was about to start eating. Mei walked up close to Shikamaru and said to him, her creepy smile growing even wider as she said loudly, "Shikamaru, I'm so glad they found you, and I'm even happier you could join us for dinner." Then she leaned in for a hug, which everyone in the room seemed to find odd, and Shikamaru looked a little scared. Mei wrapped her arms around Shikamaru and then pulled him into an embrace and whispered in his ear, "Don't think I didn't figure out your little plan to use your girlfriend to run interference in your stead. I guess you don't actually want to be able to show her a good time." She said the last part, filling her breath with some scalding hot mist that burned his neck. They broke apart, Mei walking over to the table, a smile still plastered on her face. Shikamaru grabbed his neck and looked over at Tamari with a, "Why the hell did you make me come here?" look in his eyes. She shrugged and looked puzzled as to why he was holding his neck. He thought to himself, "Damn troublesome women," as he walked over to the table and took his seat next to Tamari. He grabbed a bowl of pork ramen and slid it over in front of him, breaking apart his chopsticks. Mei addressed Tamari, "So are you going to be meeting your brother at the new cage strategy session that is coming up tomorrow?" Tamari answered, "No, my other brother Kankuro and his student Matsuri are going to accompany him this time." Shikamaru had been hardly listening to his girlfriend talk with the Mizukage when he suddenly felt two quick bursts of memory shoot into his mind. His brain took a second to process what had just assaulted him, and he realized that the two clones he sent out with Hinata must have been dispelled. Suddenly a vision of Sasuke slicing through Shikamaru's body with a sword played before him. Shikamaru stood up and shouted, "Naruto!" Naruto looked up from his bowl, stunned, noodles still dangling from his mouth. Shikamaru stood up from the table and said, "This is bad, Naruto, it's Sasuke, he's attacked Hinata." Naruto answered, "What?" Shikamaru said, "I'll explain fully on the way, but basically I had a shadow clone with Hinata and it was just killed by Sasuke." Naruto stood up and said, "Sasuke. Damn it, Sasuke, why would you attack Hinata? Lead the way, Shikamaru." Shikamaru started to make his way towards the exit with Naruto. Tamari stood up and said, "I'll go too, guys." Shikamaru nodded and the three of them were out of the door, headed towards Sasuke and Hinata in a flash. Mei sat there a little shocked by the sudden turn of events. She wondered if this was another one of the Shadow Ninja's tricks, but she doubted it. The look on his face seemed much too genuinely shocked to have been faked. She figured that if some serious action was going to go down with the Akatsuki and Sasuke, she would not be left out, she'd go out and see for herself. Mei then stood up and started to follow the three young shinobi who had just left her dining room. Hinata stood there frozen in a state of shock as she watched Sasuke drop down in front of her and slice his sword through both of Shikamaru's shadow clones in the blink of an eye. Sasuke then landed in front of her with an expressionless face as he put his sword back in its sheath, and Hinata stuttered out, Sasuke-kun." Sasuke looked at her and then said, "Hello Hinata, it's been a long time, hasn't it?" Hinata put a determined face on and activated her Byakugan as she took a defensive pose. Sasuke laughed and said, "Ha, so that's how it is, and I thought we could sit here and have a nice little chat about how you and all my other buddies from Konoha have been doing." Hinata spoke up, her voice ringing with determination, "I won't let you hurt Naruto-kun." Sasuke laughed again as he watched Hinata power up chakra to her fists, forming what looked like a lion's mouth on each. He said, "So I see your schoolgirl crush on Naruto is as strong as ever. You should let him see this side of you more often, Hinata." Tough is a good look on you. The years have treated you well. You've turned into quite the beautiful heiress of the second greatest clan in Konoha. Well, I suppose now it may be the greatest, his voice arrogantly sarcastic on the word greatest, since I the last Uchiha am no longer a leaf ninja. Hinata said, staring straight into Sasuke's dark eyes. They know you're here, Sasuke. Shikamaru's clone's memory will have returned to him by now. There is no way that the village will let you near Naruto. Sasuke answered, well, it's a good thing that I'm not looking for Naruto, or at least not yet. No, in fact I came here looking for you, Hinata-chan. The chan laced heavily with sarcasm. Hinata looked taken aback by this revelation and asked, why would why you want me, Sasuke-kun? Sasuke gave her a wide smile and said, well, I am the last of the Uchihas, and I will need some girl to help me repopulate the world with my clan, so I figured why not take the princess of Konoha away from them. Won't your clan just love it when we weaker, once again a sarcastic emphasis on the word weaker, Uchihas are brought back into the world by their very own heiress. Hinata seemed shocked by these words and stared at Sasuke. You mean, Sasuke-kun, you want to with me? Bu. But Naruto-kun, Hinata's face was turning redder by the second as the realization of what Sasuke was implying sank deeper into her brain. Sasuke took a step forward and said, that's right, Hinata, I'm not as stupid or blind as Naruto, who would even look at Sakura when you were around. Hinata let the chakra dissipate from her hands as her blush grew and she still stared bewildered at Sasuke, not believing what she was hearing as she started to ask, but Sasuke-ku. In that moment that she let her guard down, Sasuke pounced and hit her with a quick strike to a vital point on her upper chest that immediately knocked her out. Sasuke caught her and laid her gently on the ground as Kabuto landed next to him from the spot he had been watching from in the trees. Kabuto said, well, that was an interesting ninja battle, quite the unusual approach for you to take, Sasuke. Sasuke answered coldly, I was just curious to see if it would work. Usually on weaklings like her I'd use genjutsu, but seeing as she has the Byakugan, I figured I'd go with a chakra-free genjutsu. Kabuto laughed and said, here I thought you were trying to be a good teammate and saving her from damage as I said I had some experiments in mind for her. Sasuke laughed derisively as he answered, as if I give a damn about your sick little experiments. And don't do too much to her. All of that stuff I said about her being the perfect candidate to mother the next generation of the Uchiha clan was true. Sasuke knelt down and cupped her face in one hand as he manually opened her eyelid with his second hand as he contemplated her lavender eyes. Kabuto laughed out loud. Wow, could it be that Sasuke Uchiha, the heartless bastard who killed his master and looks at all of his comrades with disdain, could actually care about this trivial little girl? And here I was thinking the only thing that ever got your heart was Naruto. Sasuke looked up at Kabuto, anger flashing in his eyes for a brief moment before his calm demeanor was restored as he retorted, watch what you say, Kabuto. Don't think that you being my Akatsuki teammate means I won't kill you. I care nothing for this girl, but she has very strong shinobi genes, something that I want in the future mother of the rebirth of the Uchihas. Now take her back to base. I want to wait and see if I'll be lucky enough to end it with Naruto here and now. Kabuto knelt down and picked up Hinata in his arms as he said, well, good luck, Sasuke. If Naruto does come with Shikamaru, I dug up a little surprise for our shadow-using friend so you can have Naruto all to yourself. Oh, and if Naruto comes with too many allies, make sure to head back. I don't want to explain to Madara why I let the last of the Uchihas get captured, I am still new to the Akatsuki. Sasuke answered, don't worry, Kabuto, today I'm only here for Naruto, Konoha will feel my wrath another day. But like I said, do anything too depraved or damaging with the girl and you'll have to answer to me. Kabuto laughed as he responded, don't worry. I'll be a perfect gentleman. Then Kabuto leapt into the tree tops and started making his way back towards the Akatsuki hideout. Sasuke stood there in anticipation as he could sense Naruto's chakra approaching. Naruto and Temari followed closely behind Shikamaru as the trio raced through Konoha towards the spot just outside the city where Shikamaru's clone was destroyed by Sasuke. Shikamaru's mind was racing, replaying the few seconds his clone saw Sasuke before it was dispatched. He cursed silently to himself. He was doing a bad enough job on this mission and now Sasuke was involved somehow, which certainly could only things up for him even more. He still didn't understand what Sasuke was doing here, and if him attacking them was sheer coincidence or if his target was actually Shikamaru, or much more likely Hinata. Naruto asked, I don't understand what's going on Shikamaru. Why is Sasuke here and why would he attack you and Hinata? Shikamaru answered, I don't know either Naruto, I only saw him for a few seconds. Naruto continued asking questions, but why was Hinata outside of the village with one of your shadow clones? Shikamaru turned back and exchanged a look with Temari asking with his eyes if he should tell the truth or lie, and her eyes answered back, this is your mess you decide. Shikamaru thought that explaining his complex plan and motives would not be helpful at this point, so he answered, she wanted me to help her with something, and I'm a lot more afraid of what Temari would do to me if I sent a clone with her, so I decided to send one with Hinata. Naruto seemed appeased by the answer and they continued on in silence for another minute. Shikamaru was still trying to figure out what Sasuke was up to, and why he'd be here now. He couldn't decide whether it was coincidence or if Hinata was Sasuke's target, but the more he thought about it the more he doubted that Sasuke being there and attacking them could be a coincidence. Sasuke was a cold and calculating opponent. If he attacked them when neither had noticed his presence he had a reason. Surely Sasuke was aware that it was a shadow clone when he attacked, so he must know that I'll be aware of his presence. Then it hit Shikamaru. Sasuke knew the first thing he'd do when he found out about his attack on Hinata would be to get Naruto. Shikamaru slapped himself. This must be a trap to get Naruto out of the village, and he realized that as he watched the gates appear in his field of vision, he realized that he had just led Naruto into that trap. He also knew that there was no way that Naruto, having come this far, would back away from saving Hinata or a confrontation with Sasuke. Shikamaru thought that if this were a game of shogi he had foolishly moved his king within 2 moves of checkmate and now had nothing but the strength and skills of Naruto, Temari, and himself to get out of the corner he had just painted them into. While Shikamaru was figuring out the situation, Naruto's mind was buzzing with a million different thoughts. He was nervous, and genuinely concerned for Hinata. He still wanted to believe that there was some good in Sasuke, but he was certain that Sasuke had killing intent for Sakura in his last meeting with him, and if he was after Hinata it could certainly not be for anything to her benefit. Thinking about Hinata in danger really stabbed him deep in the heart. His mind thought of how she told him that she loved him and repeated his ninja way to him seconds before pain flung her up in the sky. He still wasn't sure of what he exactly felt for Hinata, and this whole past 24 hours with Mei had really confused the shit out of him in that regard even more, but he did know that no matter what she was one of his most precious people. He couldn't let Sasuke take her from him. He still desperately didn't want to lose Sasuke, but Naruto knew that if Sasuke ever hurt Hinata he could never forgive him. Naruto also could never forgive himself if something happened to Hinata and he never got the chance to thank her and let her know how much she meant to him. He really hated himself right now for the way he acted towards her after the pain incident. She was so brave and strong, and he felt weak and pathetic that he couldn't face her, when she could give her everything for him. Shikamaru stopped them a little bit outside the gates and said, Naruto, you know. Naruto cut him off, his eyes and voice burning with conviction, I know what you're going to say, Shikamaru. That this is a trap and Sasuke is after me. That's the only reason he'd go after Hinata. I know all that, but there is no way you can tell me not to go. This is Sasuke, and even more important than that is that it's Hinata. I don't care if the whole Akatsuki is there waiting for me, I won't lose. I'll save Hinata and stop Sasuke even if it's the last thing I do. Shikamaru sighed one of his usual deep sighs and answered, "Yay, I know Naruto, I knew you'd react that way, you wouldn't be Naruto if you didn't. Don't worry, Tamari and I are going to be right there to back you up as troublesome as it is." Naruto stuck his thumb out in his usual thumbs up pose and said, "Thanks, Shikamaru." Right as the three of them were about to head deeper into the forest, a silver-haired figure with purple eyes wearing an open Akatsuki cloak and no shirt with a triple-bladed red scythe strapped to his back landed in front of them. He smiled and said, "There you are, you mother piece of shit." Shikamaru's jaw dropped as he stared in disbelief at Hidan. He thought to himself that it couldn't be Hidan, because he was supposed to be buried deep in the ground on Nara family grounds, never to be seen again. Hidan continued to smile and laugh as he continued, "That's right, Shadow, a little fairy with glasses dug me up and stitched me up and said that all I had to do to repay his faggy was to kill you, and I said that would be no problem. In fact, I'd love it. Me and Jashin have a score to settle with you." Tamari stared over at Shikamaru, concerned about his reaction to this shinobi. She pieced it together that this must be the immortal Akatsuki member who had killed Asuma, and then was subsequently defeated by Shikamaru. She knew that this fight was going to be no joke. Hidan watched as Tamari stared down Shikamaru and said, "Looks like you got yourself a hot little piece of while I was away. Don't worry, I'll take good care of her after I'm finished spilling your guts all over this forest." He licked the blade of his scythe as he turned to Naruto and finished, "You can go on ahead, Itachi's emo little fag brother is waiting for you a few hundred feet behind me." Shikamaru looked at Naruto and said, "Don't worry Naruto, I put him in the ground once, I'll do it again, just go deal with Sasuke." Naruto nodded and said, "That's right Shikamaru, I won't be able to look at you as my equal anymore if you lose to a guy like this, and don't worry, I have no intentions of losing to Sasuke either." With that, Naruto jumped over Hidan and made his way towards Sasuke as Tamari and Shikamaru stared down Hidan, who was laughing away.